Thanks. Okay, hello everybody. Last talk of the day. I'm really happy to be here. So this talk is Algorithmic Collusion by Large Language Models, and this is joint work with Yannai, Gonczarowski, and Shorrer. Hold on. Okay. So some of you have probably seen this before. This happened in 2011, and what happened here were there were two sellers for the same product on Amazon. One was pricing at 0.99 times the competitor, and the other was pricing at 1.27 times the competitor. So as you expect, the prices blew up into the millions for this ordinary book. And algorithmic pricing in the decades since then has gotten a lot more sophisticated and also more prevalent. It could turn out to be pro-consumer, but also algorithmic pricing raises concerns of algorithmic collusion. So throughout this talk, when I mention collusion, what I'm referring to is pricing above Nash levels. And with algorithmic collusion specifically, there's a wide spectrum of different kinds of collusion. There's a nice article by Klein that lays out this taxonomy. On the one, and you can sort of break it down based on how feasible and enforceable it is. So on the one far end of the spectrum, you have explicit algorithmic collusion. This is essentially if you have a traditional cartel and they just happen to write code to implement their collusive policies. On the other end of the spectrum, however, you have autonomous algorithmic collusion. So this is when you have independent self-learning agents that learn to collude despite no explicit instruction to do so. And the really interesting thing about autonomous algorithmic collusion is it's unclear whether it's even feasible in the first place. And if it is feasible, it's also not clear how you might enforce this as a regulator. And for this reason, there's been quite a large literature around autonomous algorithmic collusion, trying to better understand feasibility and also mechanisms that cause it to arise and all sorts of things. And in particular, I want to highlight the literature showing feasibility. So here on the screen, I have 3 papers demonstrating that autonomous algorithmic collusion can indeed arise if you use pricing agents based on Q-learning. And in particular, the first 2 papers on the screen, those are a pricing environment, and the third is in a bidding environment. The results are the same either way. However, Q-learning specifically suffers from certain barriers that prevent it from being feasible in practice. For one, Q-learning requires a very long training period. So for example, in the Calvano paper, they needed hundreds of thousands of periods to converge in the first place. Moreover, Q-learning is exploitable. So there's certain adversarial policies that you can extract revenue from Q-learning. And for these reasons, it's unclear whether Q-learning might cause feasible autonomous algorithmic collusion. However, LLMs sidestep these concerns. And moreover, people are already using LLMs in certain business activities. Here on the screen, this went viral earlier this year. We have LLM-generated product titles on Amazon. And as you can see, there was very little oversight that went into these titles. But they're clearly ChatGPT generated, and so it stands to reason if people are using these things to generate product titles, maybe soon they'll also use LLMs for pricing. And so this gives rise to the main question of this talk. Can LLMs give rise to more feasible autonomous algorithmic collusion? To study this question, we conduct experiments using LLM-based pricing agents. And we look at 3 main questions. So first, we want to understand are LLMs even advanced enough to set prices in the first place? And here we find, yes, GPT-4 is able to do so. And specifically, we measure this by looking at a toy monopoly environment. But previous generation LLMs, such as GPT-3.5, aren't quite ready. Second, we then turn to a duopoly environment. We want to understand whether collusion can arise. Here too, we find, yes, multiple LLM-based pricing agents will collude. And we have various robustness results. And finally, we ask, what are the mechanisms that give rise to this collusion? In particular, the way we control these LLMs is that we prompt them. So we ask, do certain phrases in the LLM prompt promote collusion? And here too, we find connections between the words in the prompt and collusive outcomes. And moreover, the words in the prompt can be entirely innocuous. Any questions before I move on to the model? I'll start with the economic environment. So in all our experiments, we're running in this differentiated Bertrand oligopoly model taken from the Calvano paper. What we have here is each firm has their own differentiated copy of the product, and they set a price on the market, PI. The quantity sold is given by this formula. And basically what's happening here is if my product's quality is higher, then I sell more. And also if my price is lower, I sell more. But this is a logit demand model, which means that it tapers off continuously. So if I undercut everybody by a cent, I don't get all of the market share. Instead, I get some of it, and then I get more and more market share, smoothly tapering off as I go lower. The profit earned, that formula is exactly as you expect. And then one more detail to note is this parameter alpha here. this is something that changes the currency units in which the prices are expressed. And the reason we do this is because we're going to be telling the LLMs the prices in text form. And it's not clear at all to us that, say $1 has the same meaning to the LLM as $3.2, for example. And so we do this conversion in order to sort of smooth out any such effects. And we indeed also find that there's no such effects. Now I'll go to the overall experimental setup. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing many rounds of pricing using LLM agents. Specifically, each experimental run has 300 rounds of pricing where all firms set prices and they receive feedback and then we repeat. The schematic here has one round highlighted in detail. So what's happening here, there's two boxes. There's an LLM call box and then there's a compute box. The LLM call box is where the main action is happening. So here it takes a bunch of data as input and then it outputs a price. More specifically, it gets as input, so first market history. This is the last 100 periods of history, so that involves all prices set by all firms, and also the firm's own quantity sold and profit earned for 100 previous periods. And then also it gets this thing called plans and insights. This is LLM generated text from the previous round. So how this works is the LLM starts off with no plans, then we ask it to generate plans, and then it gets to see access to its plans in the next round. And then it overwrites these plans, and then it keeps going. So in this way, we're giving the LLM some sort of continuity of thought between periods so that it can actually make plans, try something, and then remember what it was trying to do in the future. Any questions here? Oh, I should also say the LLMs are not talking to each other. Hopefully the diagram makes that clear, but the only information exchange that is happening is via the prices they're setting. Great, okay, so now what I want to do is I want to zoom in on this LLM call box because what I've shown you so far is I'm giving it a bunch of data and then it's setting a price, but it's not clear exactly how that happens. So I'm going to walk you through the prompt that makes this possible. So each pricing agent, it's setting the price using a single query. And the query is structured as follows. This is essentially a very long chain of thought prompt. So first we have the prompt prefix. These are short initial instructions that govern the overall behavior. So here we tell it its task is going to be doing pricing and the top priority is to maximize profit. Second in the prompt, we include some basic information. So for example, the cost. Third, we give it the market history I already explained before. So this is the last 100 periods of history, including all prices and the own quantity sold and profit earned. And since the previous talk was talking about budget, this is where the budget goes because it's really expensive to include 100 periods of history every single round. Fourth, we have the plans and insights. So this consists of a couple of things. First, we tell the LLM what we mean when we say plans and insights, like what it should be writing there, what it should use that space for. And then it actually gets to see the plans and insights from the previous round. Finally, we have output instructions. So this is where we tell it should actually write down the plans, insights, and final price. Any questions about this setup? Cool, okay. Yeah, so now I want to zoom in on the prompt prefix because one of the things we're really interested in doing is we're interested in understanding how does the input prompt affect the resulting LLM agent's behavior? And there's previous literature on LLMs that has shown that LLMs, they sort of pay most attention to the beginning and maybe also the end of the prompt. So if there's anything we're going to be changing, it makes sense to change the beginning of the prompt. So when I show you different treatments of different prompts, the 2 through 5, all these things, they're going to stay exactly the same. It's just the prompt prefix that we're going to be varying.
Question?
Yeah.
What is plans there?
What is plans?
Yeah, in number 5.
Plans is, we're asking the LLM to write down its plans for future rounds. So for example, maybe it's going to undercut, and if it likes that, then it's going to continue to undercut. So then its plans would say something like, I'm going to try undercutting. If this gives more profits, I will continue to undercut. And so that would be the text and plans. And then, so these plans that it writes, it's going to see also in the next round.
Okay, so they're really high level kind of abstract plans. They're not these big contingent trees.
No,
periods deep.
They're not smart enough for that. Or, they're not showing us that they're smart enough for that, I should say. Typically plans are like 3 sentences or so, and they'll say something like, I'm going to do this. Hopefully it works. If not, I'll go back to this. It's typically that sort of thing.
Understood.
Yeah.
Do they know that they're playing a game and what the specific things are? You mentioned your basic information is the cost. Or do they know, okay, like there are that many other agents that are setting the price, the dynamics are this and that, and they may reason in these ways?
That's a good question. So they know that they're trying to assist a user with pricing. This is why we have bonus slides. So I have bonus slides with the full prompt. So this is literally everything that's happening here. So we tell it it's assisting a user in setting a price, it's gonna be given data. We don't tell it so much information about the competitor purposefully because we don't want it to strategize based on the number of other adversaries that are on the marketplace. This is also sort of thinking about Amazon as a potential application. We don't, like on Amazon, we don't typically know how many people we're competing against. And you also asked about the product information. We literally just say 2 sentences like this. Yeah, does this answer your question? Is there any?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
To clarify, so the plans for the future, they included in the prompt for the next round.
Yeah.
Oh, so in some sense, the algorithm has a memory.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what, and we also, there's no slide for this, but we also tried removing this, like lobotomizing out this memory. And what we found, it was much worse at the Monopoly task, for example, which I'll show you. So it's really, something with these plans and insights is really helping it maintain memory across these periods. Somebody also, in a previous talk, they asked me, why not let it write more plans and insights from like all the previous rounds? This is a budget issue because the plans are quite large. Let me show you some example plans. Yeah, so these are so this is what's in the prompt, and then the blue is what the LLM wrote last time to include in the prompt here. So these are,
Like the last rounds.
yeah, exactly. In round N, we only see N-1 plans, because otherwise it gets too long for the context window. Yeah?
So the LLM that's going to be called the next round, or it's just like.
Kind of, yeah, so this is what we tell it. Let me remind myself, actually. Yeah, I guess we don't explicitly tell it, like, make sure to keep everything, otherwise you're gonna lose it, but, we sort of, yeah, this is what we tell it. We definitely, it knows that it's gonna get access to it in the future. I also think we're using GPT-4. GPT-4 is smart, but it's not so smart that it's necessarily thinking about helping its future self do things anyway. Or maybe, I don't know, but, you had a question?
How much diversity do you see in the plans? Is it generally kind of the same kind of planning through different runs of this experiment, or is there like a lot of different, I don't know, types of planning and personas?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question. I guess but it depends on what you were expecting. One way I can answer that is with this graph, which is like the entire punchline of the talk. This whole talk is out of order. This is awful. But what we do is we do a text analysis on the plans on each sentence, and then we cluster them based on the different sentences. And these are LLM generated labels of the clusters. And there are 20 of these. So these represent like maintain pricing within profitable range. In this cluster are a bunch of sentences that talk about maintaining pricing within some range. And you'll notice here, some of the labels repeat themselves. This indicates to me that the LLM has like maybe fewer than 20 ideas, but also for sure more than 10 ideas. So it's sort of doing different things, but the action space is maybe more limited. Yeah, the action space, yeah, it sort of depends on what you expect, but the action space looks something like this. Any more questions? Otherwise, I'll get back on track. Cool, okay. No, I'm very happy to have it interactive. It's much easier that way. Okay, so in excruciating detail, we went over this prompt. Then, so then I was talking about the treatment. So we're gonna be varying the prompt prefix in a couple of different ways. We have this baseline prompt prefix, which we call P0. This is just a thing that says you're gonna be setting prices, please maximize profit. And then we have 2 treatments, which we call P1 and P2. Both of these consist of P0 with an additional goal tacked on. So P1, we sort of reiterate the importance of maximizing profitability. With P2, we hint to it that if you undercut the competitor, you might get more market share. And so what we're going to be doing in a lot of our experiments is we're going to be comparing the pricing behavior of LLM agents using these 2 prompt prefixes. Okay, so the first question we want to understand is whether LLMs are advanced enough to even do pricing in the first place. Here we see 4 models compared. We also compared many more in the paper. And the takeaway is basically GPT-4 is good enough, but GPT-3.5 is not. By the way, I should say what the task is. The task is we have a single LLM-based pricing agent in a monopoly environment. So when you're in this monopoly environment, there's a single profit maximizing monopoly price. It just has query access to a function. It's trying to maximize that function. And we see, yeah, GPT-4 can do it every time, whereas GPT-3.5 can't. The 2 plots, oh yeah.
Are they outcomes counting?
Yeah, this is temperature 1. So yeah, that's also, or was that your question? Sorry.
Like when you give a given, like when you
Oh, from in the economic environment.
Right.
Yes, this-
So are they responsible by?
Mhm.
It's gonna be like.
This is fixed. We have robustness results in the duopoly setting with noisiness. And there we're interested in whether collusion continues to exist. And so, but we do find that happens. We also, it's not in the paper, we did test monopoly with noise. And if it's a small amount of noise, GPT-4 can still handle it, it's not shot. Yeah. Yeah, so you see the pricing graphs, GPT-4 both show the price is set as a function of time. GPT-4 finds the monopoly price and sticks to it. Monopoly price is given in green. GPT-3.5 doesn't really know what's going on. It just sort of prices randomly. Yeah, so for the rest of these experiments, therefore, we focus on GPT-4. So then second, we want to investigate if you have multiple LLM-based pricing agents interacting in this environment, do they collude? And okay, so specifically, we studied 2 LLM-based pricing agents, and we have 42 experiments total. 21 are P1 versus P1, 21 are P2 versus P2. And then each experiment gets its own dot in the scatter plot. So on the left-hand side, you see the prices that the experiments result in after the 300 rounds, or specifically, these are like averaged over the last 10 or 50 periods. And what we see, so the red dotted line corresponds to the Nash price of the single stage game. And the green dotted line corresponds to the price a monopolist would set if it controlled both agents. So what we see here is the prices of both firms, for the most part, are above Nash, indicating collusion. And moreover, P1 is significantly more collusive than P2. So the prices it sets are much higher than P2's prices. In fact, the P1, this cluster of blue dots, they're sort of centered around this intersection of the 2 monopoly prices, indicating that it's sort of approximating what a monopolist could do. We can also confirm this in the plot on the right-hand side with the profits. So there, note that the weird axes, by the way, so the vertical axis is the sum of profits earned by the 2 firms, and the horizontal axis is the difference in profits earned by the 2 firms. And so we see, and then, the green line at the top, this is the profits a monopolist would make if it controlled both agents. And so we see that a lot of the blue dots are very close to this green line, indicating not only is P1 colluding, but it's often earning profits close to the highest possible monopoly profits. Any questions about the duopoly experiment? Yeah.
I mean, do you know that they're actually colluding, or they're just sort of correlated?
Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, our definition of collusion is above Nash.
Okay.
So my answer to that is we have a really weak definition, depending on what your thoughts. The second answer to that question is, it sounds like you're worried about, well, you're facing off symmetric agents, so maybe they're just copying each other. We have robustness for that. So one way robustness thing we already talked about with your question is that we add some noise to the environment. But the thing you're concerned about, I guess, is the third item, so different prompts. And so when we face off P1 versus P2, we still get collusion. Actually, also when we face off our LLM agents, so both P1 or P2 against Q learning, we still get collusion. And here it's worth pointing out, because probably this audience, some people might know of this Calvano paper, we're facing off a non-pre-trained version of the Q learning, so it's essentially just playing random noise. But still, the fact that it maintains high prices against this adversary, that indicates that it's definitely not copying. They look very different if you look at the passive play. Does this address that question?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
And what was the difference between P1 and P2?
Oh yeah, great. So P1 and P2 are just 2 different text treatments at the start of the prompt. Everything else is the same. So they still get the plans, they still have the market history. The only difference is P1, we tell him, don't undermine profitability. In P2, we tell it to explore more, and we tell it pricing lower than your competitor will typically lead to more profits. Okay, so like I said, we have various robustness results. We also have verified that the collusion still persists if they have different qualities of their products, since we're having a differentiated model. Yes, okay, so we, in addition to, how much time do I have, Yannai?
I would skip the.
You would skip options?
It's.
Okay,
We started 4:45.
we started 4:45. Oh, okay. Cool. Okay, so we also have results for options. Please check them out in the paper. We run a regression trying to understand the extent to which these agents, what they're doing is consistent with reward punishment scheme. And you can see here that The specific regression we run indicates that P1 is more sticky and more responsive than P2. So these are two features of reward punishment scheme, which is consistent with tacit collusion. And this is also consistent with our observations that P1 is colluding more than P2. And then finally, I'll bring up the slide for the text analysis again. So I talked before about how we want to look into more what the LLM is saying and how this relates to the person behavior. And we do this using the following experimental setup. So we take some plans written by the LLM. Here there's two columns. The first column is written by P1, the second column is written by P2. These are more example plans, by the way, if you were interested. So those of you who have worked with ChatGPT, you know that ChatGPT likes to write lists like this. So these are example plans. Then what we do is we embed these using an off-the-shelf embedding. And then we do PCA, and then we cluster these vectors. And then, so then we end up with 20 clusters, and then we keep track of which prompt each vector came from in the cluster. And then that's how we get the relative prevalences that you see on this chart that I showed you already 10 minutes ago. And yeah, it's sort of this gives us a different insight into what the LLM says and how it relates to what the LLM does. In particular, so P1 is the more occlusive prompt. And so something about maintaining pricing within profitable range is more associated with this more occlusive prompt. Whereas if we look at the very bottom of the chart, experiment with slightly higher pricing, continuing undercutting the competitor's price, somehow these features are more associated with less collusive outcomes. I think I will stop there due to time restrictions. Thank you for all the questions.
In the spectrum auction, there were examples where they were communicating with each other, like with the cents, the price, like by odd or even pennies or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's a form of collusion. Do you think these
Yeah.
things would do something like that?
That's a good question. My off-the-cuff guess is GPT-4 is probably not smart enough, but maybe GPT-5, I don't know. It depends how long OpenAI withholds that from us. Yeah, no, so this is definitely, yeah, no, I mean, these LLMs are smart, but there's also only so much they could do, and it seems like that's probably currently out of their scope, but maybe soon, I don't know, it would be interesting. Yeah?
So 30 or 40 years ago in Massachusetts, there was this thing where companies were doing radio ads where they were saying that, okay, this is my price, and if anybody goes lower, I'm gonna not only match their price, but beat it by 10%. So you're gonna get the 10% refund from me. And then that was made illegal because it promotes collusion. So here you're looking at a really like completely implicit collusion where they don't get any messages. But would there be some sort of LLMs being so good at natural language? Would there be something that they could put out there in public to talk to each other that's not so blatant as that would still?
Yeah, I mean, so like the subject of this paper is autonomous algorithmic collusion, which is this whole situation where you get collusive outcomes, even without this like typical cartel like collusion, or I guess what you're talking about is more like, I put out a message to the world and I hope this causes people to collude with me or something.
Yes.
But yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, I think that's like inbounds for future work, right? To figure out if LLM agents are talking to each other. I would say if I was a seller and I was using these things, if I let them talk to my competitors, I feel like I would just be worried about liabilities. I'm not a lawyer, but that's what would scare me, but it doesn't mean it's not interesting work, of course, right? Yeah.
Very quick question. So in the plot on the lower left, you have how P versus P1 plays and P2 versus P2.
Yeah.
If you place them off against each other, where on this plot do they end up?
This is a good question. It's like in the middle. And in particular, P1 price is higher than P2 when they face off against each other. And we have this nice like triangle plot where basically, yeah, like consistently P1 is higher than P2 for some reason. Still in a collusive way.
Yeah, but it's still more on the diagonal than if you would just have like, I don't know, if you just took the average P1 with just P1 and the average P2 versus P2.
This is what you get. Yeah, so it's sort of like they're between Nash and Monopoly. But let me think. So firm one is the one with P1, I guess, because he's pricing higher. Yeah, that direction. Yeah,
Is there any insight like on if this still happens, if you have more LLM agents or anything like that?
we haven't tried more than 2. That would be interesting. There's other work using Q-learning that probably extends from 2 to N, but we haven't tried that with LLMs.
You mentioned this shortly about like responsiveness to other prices. Did you like, are they bidding the Nash price if the opponent bids the Nash? Did you just tried it like without like just some other agent just setting the Nash price and then you let an LLM play against it?
Okay, so you're suggesting, for example, like a fixed adversary that's playing
Yeah.
Nash, whether that's sort of, if it's a fixed adversary, that's kind of like the monopoly environment. It's essentially like a more attractive outside option or something. So that's, I would say without having run that experiment, that's probably what would happen. Maybe also that's interesting to you is like some of these P2, so I've been telling you, oh, collusion happens a lot, but some of these P2 experiments, if you look at the orange dots and like near the red corner, some of them do end up pretty much at Nash. It's rare, but it does happen. And those charts might please you because if you look at the prices over time, they descend to Nash and then they hit Nash and they sort of have converged to it in a sense. And so they, in these 3 dots in the corner, they like sort of recognize where they were and they stuck there. Does that answer the question or were you wondering about something?
Yeah,
different?
so the question is like, that was also the first question that I had.
Okay.
If they do understand the dynamics, they know that there's another player there, can they actually see, well, it's actually pretty smart to include, like upfront, seeing this, and then trying to steer the other one, like bidding high. Is that how would you check this?
Can you repeat the question?
So the Q-learning agent that you tested against, which is probably just playing randomly for the
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it totally is.
If you'd have another agent which is learning way faster and being on these prices, and if that one would exploit your agent, would this still go to Nash or would it still try to just bid high and keep bidding high even though it's a stupid thing to do? That's the question.
Oh, okay, so so one answer to this is like, we have faced us off against Q-learning. And then like this is what you get. And then I guess more generally, like if you're pricing above Nash, the best response is below Nash. Maybe we should talk, I'm still not understanding the question. Yeah, let's talk, yeah. Any other questions besides this?
Yeah, so because this is so the next part is the discussion part. So if you have more questions, we can continue some discussion. I have actually one question.
Oh, okay, cool.
So
Yeah.
is there any way to avoid the algorithmic collusion? Because when we use LLM.
We don't know yet. What we've shown is 2 different prompts cause different degrees of collusion. And actually, the story behind the P2 prompt, which I can go back to, the less collusive prompt, is I personally really wanted something, I was trying to get something to converge to Nash. I thought that would be like a nice illustration. And so P2 went through many iterations. I was really trying to get something to converge to Nash and I couldn't actually. It's like very hard to get them to not collude in this way. And so that's why I don't have a good answer to this question of how do we get them to play Nash, because experimentally it seems quite hard to do, at least using current LLMs and using this specific architecture. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Have you ever seen them get back out of something that looks like for example, Nash equilibrium?
Ooh. I would have to relook at what I have seen is when I was running monopoly tests, Claude 3 Sonnet. So sort of like somewhere between GPT 3.5 and GPT 4. It found monopoly for a while, but then it got bored, I guess, and then it did something worse and it didn't realize that it already had something great. Duopoly, I would have to check the data. That's a good question though.
Because really what you're describing sounds like something going wrong with that could really be, oh, it's figured out that this is a Nash equilibrium and then it coordinates out of that equilibrium again. That would be super interesting to me.
Yeah, that's not, I would have to look at the data. That's interesting though, yeah.